Let's get back to the conversation. I am here with my co-host for the day, Rick LaRue from Rockford, Illinois, and we're talking with William, and he's been holding town forums. He's from Washington, D.C. He's been holding town forums around the country, and most recently here in Las Cruces, talking to people, asking people what they think our place should be in the world. And, Rick, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just before we go on, you asked earlier about, Will was talking about the indicators of instability, and where did Mexico rank in that? Well, he handed me this pamphlet. It has the top 60 listed, and they're not in that group. So, I mean, I guess this would be the group in the most danger.
That's
I know you guys go even further to 175, I believe.
177.
Okay.
We go to every country for which there's data.
Okay, so everybody. This is the hot list, and they're not on it.
Well, run through the top five.
Well, Somalia. The first four are Africa. You got Somalia, Sudan, Zimbabwe, and Chad, followed by Iraq.
Oh, really? Iraq's on the danger list, obviously, yeah.
And then it's the Congo, Afghanistan, Ivory Coast. So really, if looking at this, it seems like there's a lot of instability in the continent of Africa.
Yeah.
You know, William, before we left, you made a really interesting point, and I had my training as a journalist, and I wrote for papers for many years, and you had mentioned that there's a lot of news organizations, news outlets that are letting people talk about issues with half information or half truths, and I have to really agree with that. I have piped into my office CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. I listen to them all, and a lot of that information that you're hearing is more driven by emotion and less driven by facts and accuracy. And I don't know how that will change, because news has become more entertainment than information. At least some of a lot of the talking heads put themselves out as news presenters, but really they're entertainers.
Yeah. I think, one hopeful sign of that is that with the internet, and you can look for a variety of sources. And I know that I remember reading about a year ago that the BBC had reached exponential listenership and viewership here in the United States, because people were turning to them for news, for world news, because they weren't getting it.
Yeah,
you did that, Rick?
I went to the BBC just to get. You're going to have somebody that's on the right screaming at you what's wrong, and someone on the left, and I don't really just give me the information. And I'll form my point of view.
Right, and what we saw, especially during this very hot and long election cycle, is that journalists on television have gotten the idea that balanced news is letting the far right comment on what the far left just said, and that doesn't give anybody information. It just gives you two blocks of half-truths and emotion. We need that, and that's why you point out big newspapers having a hard time. I think. Of course, I think good television news is available somehow, somewhere. I don't know where to find it, but newspapers have always been sort of the bedrock of accuracy, checking facts, making sure they weren't printing hyperbole.
Right.
Rick, Rockford Register-Star. How's that paper doing?
The paper's doing okay. It's doing okay. It's a Gannett paper. It's smaller papers need less ad revenue to keep moving.
They build a tighter model.
It's local. Where something like the Tribune, or I believe the Tribune's bankrupt, the LA Times is part of that. The biggest problem is that why are the LA Times and the Chicago Tribune the same newspaper with the same editors? It's when laws were changed and you could take your media, and instead of it being independent, 25% of the country is going to get the same. It's really the same newspaper.
It's homogenized and packaged. Now, Will, when you're out and about, is it hard? Like you're on this 1 hour show, and I don't know how we rank in all the shows that you do, but is it hard when you have a limited amount of time to sort of cram everything that you need to cram in to these little sound bites or these little blocks of time, and you must walk out thinking, well, I didn't give them all the information, and you wonder if you gave them enough to have a good viewpoint?
Well, I think in any case that I've tried to approach is give something for people to walk away with, whether you've got 2 minutes on CNN, and I've done that CNN International once. I was on for like 2 minutes, and or when you have a wonderfully, a wonderful opportunity like this to be on for an hour and actually get into an in-depth discussion with someone about the factors behind our how we use our news, how we get our news, and what we do with our news, and how we think about the world because of the news. So, so you work with what you have.
Now, have you found any surprises in your travels and in your workshops? Anything that surprised you? Not surprising, but I guess the one thing I made a note while we were on break here that occurred to me to say was that a wonderful, hopeful thing is that people know the world is more complex. They may not be getting it on MSNBC or the programs you mentioned, where things are seen to be absolute. They're either this or they're that, But people know that the world is changing. I mentioned at the forum on Monday with the League of Women Voters and AAUW that, how do we not only, we have these goals. You folks have articulated some goals for the world, but how do we go about them? Do we go alone? Do we work with different countries? Do we go through the United Nations? And I said, now, just last year we used to talk about the group of 8 industrialized countries, or G7 and plus Russia, the 8th. And now we're talking overnight because of the financial crisis, the G20. And everyone picked up on that and they said, yeah, that's right. And this was a commonplace to them, and it was kind of there was an acceptance that that's the way we have to work in the world. In other words, they had digested the fact that while we are still the superpower, while our military is by far the largest in the world, while our economy is still, despite our current situation, still the predominant economy in the world, that in fact the world is changing, and we have to accommodate these new institutions for these rising powers of China and India and so on. That's an interesting point. I'm always amazed. It doesn't matter what education level people are. There's sort of this natural human intuition, and it doesn't matter if you're a high school graduate, you didn't finish high school. Everyone senses that the world is a more complex place, and there's this incredible human intuition that we have to do something different. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to believe that. And I talk to a lot of people about this at a lot of different ranges. Now, at your forums, are you seeing a wide range of education and levels of information? Well, each audience depends. I mean, sometimes we work with a group in just their membership. Sometimes the forum is open, like last night's forum that the diocese promoted. And the reason we do that is, we're not Barack Obama. We can't just call a forum and have 500 people show up. So we work with our civic groups, there's a variety of people involved, but I think you're right. I think there's a sense that there's a intuition, if you will, or just a common sense, practical approach to the world. People get it. One of the things I'll just mention this anecdote as I was driving in that connects Johnstown and Las Cruces. In Johnstown, I thought it would be provocative to talk about international trade and the steel and the decline of the steel industry. And people said, well, in fact, globalization, we're actually getting some investment from the Norwegians and the Italians. So steel is actually on its way back in a little ways. And I noticed driving in from El Paso here that one of the works that is along the highway there is ArcelorMittal, which is like the big multinational steel conglomerate. And so people get it, that it's not just the works that was here before, but international things. The world is getting smaller, and we're all realizing that. We're going to take a break right here. We're with William from Fund for Peace, and he's been holding some seminars or town hall meetings in Las Cruces. We'll be right back.